It was just past midnight when I heard it. A sharp metallic clank against the wood of my front porch, the kind of sound that makes you jolt upright because it doesn't belong in the stillness of night. For a second, I thought it might have been the wind kicking something loose, maybe a branch or a piece of siding. But then it rolled, this hollow rattle, unmistakable. A beer can. I pushed myself out of bed, heart already drumming in my chest, and pulled on a hoodie. The house was dark except for the soft glow of the porch light bleeding through the curtains. When I opened the door, there it was, a half-crushed Bud Light can wobbling to a stop by the railing. The night air smelled faintly of stale hops. I barely had time to register it before another can arced over the fence, clattering against the floorboards. Then another, each one tossed with deliberate force, each one landing just a little closer to my door. I stepped forward, squinting into the shadows across the fence, and that's when I saw him. Derek, my ex-wife's new husband. He was standing there like it was the funniest thing in the world, a six-pack dangling from one hand, the other pitching cans with lazy, practiced aim. He was laughing, loud, obnoxious, the kind of laugh that grates on your nerves. A laugh meant to be heard, meant to provoke. "Hey, neighbor," he shouted, waving the half-empty box in mock cheer. Catch! Another can came sailing over, bounced off the steps, and burst open, spraying foam across the wood. I froze, rage crawling up my throat, but before I could say a word, she appeared. My ex-wife, Emily, in her robe, barefoot on the other side of the fence. She leaned against the railing like this was some kind of casual midnight hangout, her lips twisted into that smirk I knew too well. "Don't take it so seriously," she said, voice dripping with mock sweetness. "He's just having fun. You always like cleaning up anyway." The words hit harder than the cans. Like a knife slipped between the ribs, twisted with precision. Her eyes sparkled with the same disdain she used to reserve for our final arguments, the ones that ended with slammed doors and tears that never changed a thing. Only now, she wasn't crying. She was amused, delighted, even. I clenched my fists at my sides, but I didn't move, didn't shout back. The porch light flickered above me, buzzing faintly, and for a moment the whole scene felt unreal, like I was watching myself from somewhere outside my body. Derek tossed another can, then doubled over laughing when it ricocheted off my porch railing. "Lighten up, man," he hollered. "It's just trash. Don't be so uptight." Trash. That word stuck, echoing in my head as Emily looped her arm through his and pulled him back toward the glow of their house. Their laughter trailed behind them, sharp and cutting, until their door closed and I was left standing there in silence, surrounded by aluminum and beer foam. I picked up the nearest can. It was still cold, still dripping. I turned it over in my hand, the logo catching the porch light, and I felt something tighten inside me. Not just anger, something deeper, a seed of resolve. I didn't throw the can away. I set it down on the porch railing, carefully, almost reverently, and looked out into the dark yard beyond. My jaw ached from clenching, but my voice stayed silent. They thought this was a game, a new way to remind me of what I'd lost. But as I stood there in the quiet night, staring at that first can, I realized something. Games have rules, and I wasn't about to play by theirs. Morning sunlight spilled across the yard, and for a brief second, I thought maybe the night before had been some drunken episode one could chalk up to Derek being Derek. But when I stepped outside, the truth stared me dead in the face. More cans. Not just the handful from last night. No, there were at least a dozen scattered across my lawn. Some half-crushed, some whole, some rolled right up against the flower beds I'd spent years tending. The dew clung to them, shining in the early light like little trophies of humiliation. My stomach turned as I realized they weren't just from his hand anymore. They'd been placed deliberately, tossed around while I slept. I bent down and picked one up, sticky with dried beer. My hands smelled like the bar floors I used to avoid in college. The whole yard smelled like it. Neighbors walked their dogs past my house that morning. I saw the glances, the double takes. A couple even whispered, quick little conversations just loud enough to let me know I'd been noticed. The man who lived alone in the white house on the corner. The man whose yard now looked like the recycling bin exploded. By noon, I'd gathered them all into a trash bag. The weight of it surprised me, heavier than it should have been. Every clink of aluminum echoed like mockery in my ears. I told myself I'd take the bag straight to the bin, but instead, I tied it up neatly and left it by the back porch. Something in me resisted letting it go. Later that day, I saw Emily out front, tending her roses like she used to when we lived together. She spotted me watching, and her lips curved into that smug little smile. "You know, you really should stop whining like a child," she called across the fence when I stepped closer. I froze. "Excuse me?" She straightened, gloves still on, and tilted her head. "The cans. The trash. Honestly, you always were dramatic. It's just a little mess. Clean it up and stop acting like the world is ending." And then Derek appeared, leaning on the fence post with a can in his hand, not even hiding it. He cracked it open right in front of me, foam spilling over his fingers, and took a long swig. "Yeah, man," he said, grinning through the sip. "Don't be so uptight. Real men don't sweat the small stuff." The way he said it, "real men," lit something raw inside me. It wasn't the words alone. It was the way Emily's smirk deepened, like she'd been waiting for him to say it, like she wanted me to hear it. I opened my mouth, ready to fire back, but nothing came. Just silence. My throat tightened. My chest burned. And all I could manage was to stare at them, him with his beer, her with her roses, before turning away. Behind me, I heard them laugh. Together. That night, more cans appeared. I found them tucked under the bushes, wedged against my garage door, even tossed into the bed of my truck. Every clink and crash I heard in the dark sent me out with a flashlight, but by the time I got there, they were already gone. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It was deliberate. A performance. They wanted me humiliated. They wanted me small. But instead of breaking, I started watching. I stood at my window in the dark, eyes fixed on the fence. I memorized the rhythm of their laughter, the way Derek hurled each can with a careless arc, the way Emily leaned in close to watch it land. I learned the timing of their games, the hours they chose to strike, the ways they hid in plain sight. Every insult, every piece of trash, every smirk, they thought it was cutting me down. But really, it was sharpening me. They didn't know it yet, but I wasn't just cleaning up. I was keeping score. And one day soon, I'd cash every single point. The following week was a slow grind, each day punctuated by the same humiliating ritual. I'd wake up, step outside, and find the evidence of Derek's drunken amusement waiting for me. Some days it was just a handful of cans. Other days, it was plastic grocery bags stuffed with junk food wrappers, old receipts, and half-eaten sandwiches tossed over the fence like I was running a landfill service. At first, I cleaned quietly, hoping if I didn't react, they'd get bored. But that's the thing about bullies. They don't tire out when you stay silent. They feed on it. They sniff out your restraint like sharks smell blood in the water. By the end of the second week, my yard looked less like the neat, tidy home I'd built over the years and more like the aftermath of a tailgate party gone wrong. Empty chip bags clung to the hedges. A greasy pizza box lay on its side by the garden bed. Even my driveway had soda bottles rolling into the street whenever the wind picked up. The worst part wasn't the mess. It was the eyes. Neighbors noticed. They slowed their walks just a little too much when they passed by. Some tried to hide their judgment with polite nods, but I could feel it in the air. The unspoken question, why doesn't he do something? And that burned more than the trash itself. Because I was doing something. I was watching, waiting, counting. I tried talking to Emily once more, though I knew how it would go. I caught her while she was unloading groceries, her car still running in the driveway. "Emily," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This needs to stop. The cans, the trash. You know exactly what's going on." She gave a small, amused laugh, setting a bag on her hip. "Oh, come on. Are you still hung up on that? You always did love to play the victim. It's pathetic, really." Derek came around the corner then, carrying another bag with a smirk plastered across his face. "You know, maybe if you were a real man, this wouldn't happen." The way he said it, slow, deliberate, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, made my skin crawl. He wanted an audience. He wanted me to swing, to lose control, to give him exactly the reaction he could twist into his victory. I didn't bite. I just stood there, jaw locked, eyes fixed on him. After a long pause, I turned and walked back to my house. Their laughter followed me, sharper than ever. That night, the harassment escalated. It wasn't just cans and wrappers anymore. I came home to find a half-rotten bag of fast food tossed across my porch, leaking grease down the steps. The smell hit me before I even unlocked the door. Flies buzzed lazily in the humid air. I didn't touch it. Not right away. I just stood there, staring down at the pile, and something inside me hardened. This wasn't teasing. This wasn't some immature prank. It was sabotage, slow, calculated sabotage. They wanted to drag me down into the mud, to strip away my dignity piece by piece until I was just another pile of trash beside the cans. And for the first time, I felt it, clarity. I didn't throw away the garbage. I didn't wash off the porch. I gathered everything into bags, tied them off neatly, and stored them in the shed out back. Each can, each wrapper, each greasy piece of evidence. If they wanted to play this game, then fine. I'd play. But when it was my turn, the rules were going to change. The day it all boiled over started like any other. I pulled into the driveway just after dusk, headlights sweeping across the front yard, and for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally run out of steam. The grass looked clear, no cans glinting in the light, no wrappers skittering across the pavement. But when I rounded the corner to the back patio, my chest tightened. It wasn't just a couple of bags this time. It was everything. Piles of trash towered against the sliding glass door like barricades, spilling across the wooden boards. Dozens of beer cans, some crushed, some still dripping, were scattered like metallic confetti. Half-filled fast food cups oozed syrupy sludge onto the deck. Plastic bags bulged with God knows what, tied lazily and leaking. Rotten food clumped together in slimy heaps, the stench so strong I had to cover my nose. My patio, my quiet little sanctuary where I used to drink coffee in the mornings, looked like a dump site. A deliberate, targeted dump site. I stood there, staring, my keys still in my hand, the engine of my truck ticking as it cooled. My first instinct was the same as it had always been. Grab gloves, grab bags, clean it all up before anyone else could see. Keep it private. Keep it quiet. Pretend it wasn't happening. But something in me snapped. I dropped the keys on the step and clenched my fists so tight the bones ached. My breathing came in short, sharp bursts. I'd swallowed every insult, every smirk, every beer can clattering in the night. But this wasn't just mockery anymore. This was war. And for the first time, I realized I didn't have to throw anything away. Not a single can. Not a single greasy wrapper. Not one rotting slice of pizza sliding out of its box. No, I was going to keep every piece. I stepped carefully through the mess, dragging bags to the shed out back, stacking cans into bins, organizing the chaos like it was inventory. It took hours, my back aching, my gloves slick, the stink seeping into my clothes, but I didn't care. Each item was no longer garbage, it was evidence. A record. A weapon. The strangest part? The longer I worked, the calmer I felt. The fury that had boiled inside me began to settle, cooling into something sharper, cleaner. A kind of focus I hadn't felt in years. They wanted me humiliated. They wanted me broken. But all they'd done was hand me the very tools I needed. By the time I finished, the patio was bare again, scrubbed of their filth. The shed, though my shed was full. Bags stacked neatly, cans rattling faintly in the dark, waiting. I stood there under the porch light, sweat streaking down my face, and I made a decision. No more silence. No more waiting. If Derek and Emily wanted to drown me in garbage, then I'd let them. But when the tide turned, they were going to choke on it. This wasn't about cleaning up anymore. This was about payback. And the first move was mine. There is a strange kind of work that lives between anger and patience. It isn't loud or dramatic. It's meticulous, almost boring, and that's what made it dangerous. Once I decided to stop reacting, I found myself doing things I'd never thought I'd do. Cataloging, photographing, labeling. Revenge, I learned, benefits from a spreadsheet. I started by gathering everything that had been thrown over the fence since the first night. Cans, bags, pizza boxes, a disgusting drainage of half-rotten fries, every last piece. I wore old clothes and a pair of garden gloves at first, then stopped using them because I needed to see what their hands had left behind. In the harsh white of the shed light, I could see it. Smudges, oils, ridges pressed into the aluminum like handwriting. Fingerprints. Not just generic smears. Clear arcs where someone had gripped the can, a thumbprint near a crimp tab. The thought that had once made my throat close now warmed into a slow, precise heat. This was a mistake they'd made. A lazy trace they'd left when they wanted me small. I didn't have a police badge or an evidence locker, but I had a phone with a good camera and a stubborn streak that refuses to let go. I photographed every item against a plain background, zooming in on the smudges until the ridges showed up like tiny mountain ranges. I labeled each photo with a date and a time and stored them in duplicate places, on my phone, in the cloud, on a thumb drive tucked into a book. I wrote notes about where each piece had been found, what hour it likely had been thrown, and whether a neighbor was outside nearby. I kept the actual items in the shed, stacked in clear garbage bags and numbered with a permanent marker. Every can was a receipt. Every wrapper was a line item. Preparation also meant learning the rhythm of them. I sat on my porch late into the night with a thermos of coffee, watching. They struck in waves, Friday nights after work, Sunday afternoons when beer felt like permission. Derek liked the theatrical tosses at midnight. Emily preferred daylight smirks. I jotted down times in a little notebook until a pattern emerged. Patterns are comfort. They let you transform guesswork into plans. I thought about witnesses, too. Quietly, I started talking to the people who walked past my house. The mail carrier who always whistled, the woman with the collie, the elderly man who watered his lawn at dawn. Nothing dramatic, just casual mentions. You seen a lot of cans by the fence lately? Their faces told me what I needed to know. They had noticed, and they were annoyed. That would matter later. I could have let the truth percolate into me and rot, or I could let it harden into something useful. I chose the latter. Anger turned into inventory. Shame turned into documentation. My shed became a library of proof, and every can a chapter. When you collect the story in pieces like that, the shape of it becomes impossible to ignore. I slept less, worked more, and when the sun came up, I was less a man staring at a mess and more a man making sure the mess would finally tell the story it had always wanted to tell. The night I finally acted, the air felt heavy, thick, like the world was holding its breath. Clouds hung low over the street, muting the moon, leaving only the yellow pools of light from the street lamps. Perfect cover. I moved quietly, the way you do when you know every board that creaks on your porch, every loose hinge that could betray you. My truck was parked a block away so the sound of the engine wouldn't wake them. I didn't need headlights. I could navigate my yard blind after all the nights I'd stood out there, watching. The shed was ready, stuffed to the brim with weeks of their filth. Bag after bag, tied neatly, stacked like soldiers waiting for orders. I hefted the first onto my shoulder and felt the weight dig into my collarbone. Cans clinked inside, a metallic chorus that made me pause, but no lights flicked on. Good. The walk across the property line felt electric. I half expected Emily's voice to cut through the night, some smug remark about what she and Derek thought they were getting away with. But their windows stayed dark. The only sound was the whisper of my boots in the grass and the faint buzz of a distant transformer. At his car, I got to work. Derek's pride and joy. A shiny black Dodge Charger he polished every Saturday. The kind of car meant to roar loud and remind everyone how much manhood he thought it represented. Tonight, it would be a monument, not to power, but to shame. I started slow, deliberate. One bag torn open, cans spilling like coins onto the driveway. Then another, and another. I piled them high around the tires, leaning them against the doors, scattering them across the hood. Pizza boxes got stacked on the windshield wipers. Grease-stained wrappers were pressed under the handles, so when he reached to open the door, his hands would come back sticky. Rotten food bags went right on top, the stink already rising into the night air. By the time I emptied the last sack, the car looked less like a machine and more like the centerpiece of a garbage sculpture. A twisted kind of shrine built from weeks of humiliation. I stepped back and let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My gloves were slick, my shirt clung to my back, but my chest felt lighter than it had in months. It wasn't rage anymore. It wasn't desperation. It was control. For the first time since the first can clattered across my porch, I felt in command. They wanted me buried in trash. Instead, I'd made their trash impossible to ignore. I stood there in the silence, looking at the mountain of garbage glinting under the streetlight, and imagined the morning. The neighbors stepping out with their dogs, phones in hand. Derek storming out with his swagger, only to find his Charger suffocated under the weight of his own filth. Emily frozen in the doorway, her smirk cracking. It wasn't just a trap. It was theater, and the curtain was about to rise. Morning came with the kind of quiet that feels staged, like the neighborhood itself was waiting for the show to begin. I'd been up since before dawn, sipping black coffee at the kitchen table, hands steady for the first time in weeks. Every tick of the clock pushed me closer to the moment I'd been building toward. By 7, the first dog walkers were out. Mrs. Palmer with her beagle slowed her pace, eyes locking on the scene across the fence. She stopped dead, her jaw slack. The beagle barked, tugging at the leash, but she didn't move. Instead, she pulled out her phone. Then came Mr. Henderson, watering his lawn like always, except this time his hose slipped from his hand when he saw the mountain of trash cocooning Derek's car. He muttered something under his breath, shook his head, and fished his phone from his pocket too. Within minutes, a crowd gathered. Not a mob, not yet, just curious neighbors drawn like moths to a flame. They whispered, they chuckled, some pointed, but all of them had their cameras out. The Charger sat in the center like a fallen idol, swallowed whole by garbage. And right on cue, the front door slammed open. Derek stormed out in basketball shorts and no shirt, sunglasses crooked on his face. He stopped dead when he saw it, his swagger collapsing into disbelief. "What the?" His voice cracked. He rushed forward, swatting at cans, kicking bags, his bare feet slipping on wrappers. Who the hell did this? Emily appeared seconds later, robes cinched tight, hair tangled. She froze in the doorway, eyes darting from the neighbors to the car to me. Her smirk was gone. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. I stepped out from my porch, calm as if I were taking out the morning paper. Interesting sight, isn't it? My voice carried in the silence, and heads turned toward me. Looks like someone's been throwing their trash where it doesn't belong. Derek whipped around, his face red. You set me up. You're trying to make me look like. Like what? I cut in. Like a man who's been dumping garbage on someone else's property for weeks. The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling. I held up my phone. Every can, every wrapper, every piece of trash has fingerprints. I've got photos, dates, times. Witnesses, too. This isn't a prank. This is harassment. And now everyone can see it. For a moment, Derek just stood there, chest heaving, eyes flicking between me and the car, as if searching for a way out. But there wasn't one. His kingdom of beer cans and greasy bags had become his prison, and the whole neighborhood was the jury. Emily's face drained of color. Her hand shot out as if to steady herself on the doorframe. She tried to force a smile, but it twisted wrong, brittle and panicked. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had already called. Derek cursed under his breath, kicking another bag, but it only burst open, spilling cans that clinked across the driveway like applause. The neighbors didn't laugh. They didn't look amused anymore. They looked disgusted. And in that moment, standing in the center of their judgment, Derek finally looked small. The flashing lights painted the street red and blue, and for the first time since the first can hit my porch, I felt something close to peace. The neighbors didn't scatter when the police car pulled up. They leaned in, phones still recording, hungry to see how this spectacle would end. 2 officers stepped out, adjusting their belts, scanning the scene with the kind of weary expression that says they'd rather be anywhere else but here. Still, even they couldn't hide the flicker of surprise when they saw the Charger buried under weeks of rotting trash. Derek barreled toward them, chest puffed, sweat glistening in the morning sun. "Officer, this is vandalism, pure vandalism. Look what this psycho did to my car." He jabbed a finger at me, his voice breaking. "He's trying to ruin me." The officers didn't answer right away. Instead, one crouched low, lifted a can with 2 fingers, and held it up to the light. His eyes shifted from the smudges to Derek's red face. I stepped forward, calm, measured. "That can's not mine. None of them are. They've been throwing their garbage over my fence for weeks. I've got photos, timestamps, witnesses." I held up the folder I'd prepared, crisp prints of fingerprints shining under light, bags labeled with dates. "All of this is evidence. You'll find their fingerprints all over it." The taller officer took the folder, flipping through the pages slowly. His brow furrowed. "You've been documenting this?" "Every day," I said. My voice didn't waver. Quietly, patiently. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted it to stop. But they didn't stop. The crowd murmured behind me, agreement rippling through the air. Mrs. Palmer stepped forward, her beagle tugging at the leash. "I've seen him throw cans at night," she said, nodding toward Derek. "We all have." Mr. Henderson chimed in from his lawn. "They've been making a mockery of him for weeks. Everyone here knows it." Derek's face twisted. He looked at Emily, desperate, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. She stood frozen on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, her earlier smirk now replaced with raw shame. The officer sighed, shut the folder, and looked square at Derek. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us for questioning." "What?" Derek barked, stumbling back. "This is insane. He's the one who—" "Enough." The officer cut him off, his tone sharp. "The evidence is clear. We'll sort it out at the station." The second officer stepped forward, guiding Derek toward the car. Derek struggled, sputtered excuses, but they were drowned out by the sound of neighbors whispering and the clicks of camera phones capturing every second. Emily stayed rooted on the porch, her arms tightening around her robe as if it could shield her from the judgment raining down. Her eyes finally met mine, wide and desperate, searching for something, sympathy, maybe, or forgiveness. She found neither. I turned back toward my porch, the morning air crisp against my face. The laughter, the mockery, the weeks of humiliation, all of it seemed far away now. "They thought I'd endure it forever," I said quietly, more to myself than anyone else. But sometimes the sweetest revenge is letting people drown in their own garbage. And with that, I walked inside, leaving the wreckage and them behind me.